Hi everyone and welcome to Tech Talk Live hosted by Avnet Cloud Solutions. Before we begin today's session, I'm just going to cover a few housekeeping items and introduce you to today's speakers. First and foremost, while we've got some outstanding topics and speakers for today's event, our main goal during Tech Talk is to provide you with a live opportunity to ask questions and get real-time answers to cloud questions. So if you have a topic or question that you'd like today's team to tackle, please don't forget you have a few easy options to send them to us. Option 1 is to use the chat box that you see in the bottom right of your webinar control panel. Just chat your questions to the host, presenter, or the webinar coordinator, and we'll get to them in the order they were submitted. Option 2 is to send us your questions on Twitter. Simply follow us at @AvnetCloudReady and tweet your question using the hashtag TechTalk. Now let me introduce you to our speakers and we'll get today's Tech Talk underway. Leading today's session will be Dan Allaby, Director of Cloud Offerings at Avnet Technology Solutions, and we're very excited to be joined by Alpesh Donkey, Channel Partner Manager at Amazon Web Services. So with that quick introduction, let me hand the floor over to Dan to begin today's Tech Talk Live.
Hey everyone, good morning or afternoon, I guess, depending on where you're joining from. If you're attending us again, if you've been attending these, welcome back. If you're new to Tech Talk, we do these on a regular basis, usually monthly, but I have to say there's a few months where we haven't had them, so we're starting back up. So welcome back or welcome. Got a lot to cover today. Very excited to have, as Jessica mentioned, Alpesh Donkey with us today. Welcome to the session, Alpesh. Before we kind of get into some of the questions, first of all, thank you very much for all the questions, and we are definitely going to jump on these throughout the session. Just a little bit more on the format. This is Q&A driven, so we really want to have you interact with us, and that's really the goal of the session. But as you saw in the invite, there's some topics that I decided to put out there, and we'll talk about these and in and around these throughout the session. And feel free, as Jessica mentioned, through the vehicles available to hit Q&A, hit us with Q&A, cute questions around the topics as we kind of go through this. Just a side note as well, so this is recorded and it's available on iTunes as well as YouTube and up on the Avnet Cloud Ready site. So I just want to make sure Alpesh is there. Alpesh, just welcome to the session. Are you with us? I think we might be having some technical difficulty. Jessica, maybe.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
There we go.
Awesome. All right. We're there. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the invite.
And no problem. Maybe a quick introduction for everyone before we jump in here on your role at Amazon, and just share for the folks what you do.
Sure. So again, my name is Alpesh Donkey. I'm a Channel Partner Manager at Amazon Web Services. My role is to be the resource for resellers through Avnet. So I am the point of contact into the AWS, infrastructure basically. So I work on kind of helping resellers get enabled. I often work with Avnet's field reps to help do the first presentations for resellers, to help them kind of understand the path to becoming more transactional, helping train their folks, or just helping designing what that training path should be for both the sales and the technical side, and helping understand kind of the business strategies. And then on a transactional basis, as partners are working on deals, I can be a resource to help pull in AWS resources as needed, or help vet out solutions, or kind of whatever it might be needed to help partners close business.
Awesome. Thanks, Alpesh. Hey, I saw a note from someone. A couple of you out there, just comment if you can hear us. Somebody was making a comment. There's no sound. Just wanted to see if most of you are, if that's limited to a few, or if there's a problem here. So thanks, Alpesh. Also in the room, we have Eric Haller, who is on my team and is one of our solution architects and is focused heavily in the area of Amazon Web Services, working with our partners and customers. So Eric is here, and he'll be attending the inbound questions as well, and some of those he can respond real time to you, or he'll let me know if these are topics we want to discuss. So let's get rolling. So, some of the topics that we had put out there were single account consolidated architectures. We want to talk about sort of billing models inside of AWS, cost optimization approaches, and overall AWS management is a huge topic for customers. AWS customer adoption, so some questions around migrating workloads and what that looks like, and just generally how are users consuming AWS. So I thought we'd start with a real quick services overview for those of you who are not familiar with the breadth of services that AWS offers, just real quick. So I wanted to start in that area, and then talk a little bit about billing models, and then get into some discussion around management tools that are out there. And at the end, there's a lot we're doing around this area for partners and customers, so I want to share a little bit of that with you as well around the tools that we've launched and made available. So with that, maybe we can just kick things off. Alpesh, I'm going to hand it to you. Just share for everyone a bit of an overview on the AWS services that are out there, just to give everyone a perspective on what's available.
Sure, I'll definitely walk through that. Can I get the ball so I can share a couple of slides that I've got?
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, if you're able to move the presenter over to Alpesh.
All right, will do.
Great.
All right, Alpesh, it should be coming to you shortly.
Yep, I've got it. And I'm going to pop up a quick deck. And just to let everyone know, I don't have a lot of slides, but I wanted to use a couple of slides to really just help put up a visual, right? So Amazon Web Services has a very large list of offerings that it has, and we call them services, which can kind of get a little confusing. So just say basically, if you think about each service as a product that we offer, that's kind of a good analogy to work with. So we have, I want to say, over 35 services or products that we offer. But if you look at all of those services, they fit into this general overview, right? And so I'll walk you really quickly through that to give you a quick understanding. So, and I'll start at the base, the AWS Global Infrastructure. So all of our services are based upon our global infrastructure, which is a very large array of data centers that we have around the world. We now actually have 10 regions where we have, resources that you can deploy. So we have 10 areas around the world where you can spin up servers, and you can have storage, or spin up applications. And within those 10 regions, we have this concept of something called availability zones. Just at a high level, each availability zone you can liken to a data center. And in each region, we have at least 2, if not more, availability zones. And that is there to give you the capability to design very highly available applications, right? So thinking about, like what we would translate that to on-premise, right? If you have your application, your Exchange server running just in your data center, and you can make that data center as highly fault-tolerant as possible, right? You have 2 servers supporting things, the ability to fail over multiple power sources, multiple network connections. So you made that data center as highly available as possible, and that's what we do with our availability zone, right? We made that availability zone as highly fault tolerant as possible. But what if there's a major disaster and something happens and the whole data center goes down, right? That's where you have these multiple availability zones, or AZs as we call them, allowing you the capability of having a second instance that you can quickly spin up, right? If you copy your storage over, it's a way for you to quickly get your application back up and running so that, you know, a major disaster doesn't bring down your whole infrastructure. So that global infrastructure is where you deploy your services. And as I said, we've got 10 regions around the world. Within those regions, we have multiple availability zones. So that's the basic fundamentals, right? Those data centers that you're going to actually use to spin up services. Now, on top of that, that's where the real work comes in, right? Is you start deploying, your infrastructure. And the first thing that before, if you're thinking about how you design your data center, and think about the similar things that you would run through and when you're deploying on Amazon Web Services, right, is you start out with the networking. You want to figure out how things are going to communicate, where you're going to put, restrictions, aka firewalls, or things so that you can keep your environment secure. So we have that networking layer, right, and we call that our virtual private cloud, or VPC configuration. And so VPC is the framework where you can go and define your networking. And then on top of that are the core services, right? And really, when you think about infrastructure as a service, it's fairly simple. It's basically the capability to give you compute resources and storage. And in our case, we've added database to it because we've got some managed database services. But those three are the core infrastructure services that you're going to get. So on the compute side, you've got what we call EC2 instances, which are basically virtual servers. So you can spin up any number of servers very quickly. They're very flexible. You can change the size of those servers on the fly, which gets you out of that mindset of having to really think about, I need to think about sizing my server for the next 2 to 3 years to make sure that I have enough capacity. You can start out with exactly what you need and then grow your servers on the fly without really having to do a huge lift and shift, right? So that's the compute side. And then we have multiple different storage options. We've got block storage. We've got a very flexible and cool object storage called S3, which is very famous and is very cheap, right? It's we just had a recent price reduction. It's at 3 cents per gig per month of storage. So that's the S3 storage, and then we've got archival storage options for something called Glacier, which is cold storage, right? Something that you want off-site. You're going to keep around for a really long time, but you want as cheap a storage as possible, and that's at 1 cent per gig per month. And then we've got some gateway products that you can use to get your data to our cloud. So that's in the storage arena. And then we've got some managed database services where, so for users or people who are not deep database architects and they need databases for their applications but don't want to manage all the day-to-day tasks of having a database. That's where our database services come in. We've got the various different options. RDS is one, which is a relational database service. Think about that as your SQL databases, MySQL or MS SQL, Oracle, SAP. You've got those options there. And we've also got some NoSQL database services that you can use, as well as some large petabyte-sized data warehousing that you can get as a managed service, where we handle, the updating of the databases, the kind of the day-to-day tasks of running that database, and even backing it up. We do that for you. So you've got those core services, which is really the crux of what you're going to use on AWS. And then above that are some higher-level services, which I think are best utilized by developers. So we call them application layer services. Things that make it easy for developers to take their code and get it on running infrastructure, right? Because again, developers are not experts on infrastructure. They just want, they do what they do best, which is develop code, and then they want to get it running. And so we make it easier for them to get it up and running by giving them some ways to quickly get that code into our environment, and having AWS really figure out what is the right infrastructure that needs to run that code. And then above that, and kind of encompassing and running everything, is you need to manage it, right? So we've got deployment and administration services. We've got some services that make it easier to, automate the deployment of the infrastructure we talked about, so the compute, storage, the networking, things like that. And then, managing it, right? Getting a good view of how do you, what is my utilization, from the usage side, which is for the billing, but also from the technical side, right? Uptimes, understanding the networking usage, and how much data is flowing in and out. Do I have any blockage points that I need to worry about? Is data being constrained at any certain point, single point, things like that. So you have the management on top of it to help you run the environment. So that gives you kind of a good overview. And as I said, we could get into each service, but that gets really confusing really fast. But I think this gives you a good overview of the core services and kind of how you break them up.
And I think,
sorry.
as we start talking more about, some of the challenges around billing models and management tools, it's good to have a kind of a perspective overall of what the AWS services are available, and you kind of quickly get a picture of just the depth and breadth. But I think the other element here is the granularity. So, all of these services basically can be consumed, in the way that you want to leverage them as a customer, all the way down to hourly based usage. And as we kind of start, getting deeper into billing models and cost optimization and some of those areas, at least gives you perspective on what services are available and obviously how they're billed. So I'm just thinking, maybe a good time. So one of the questions that came in up front in the session was from Alan. What are the most common migration strategies for moving from private to public cloud, such as AWS? And I have to tell you, we work with customers and partners every day in this area, and there's just honestly a lot of different ways to answer this. And I'm going to ask, both Alpesh and Eric, their perspectives. Actually, Eric, maybe from your side as a solution architect working with partners and customers around, specific workloads and architectures, maybe just share a couple of thoughts around what you see. What are the types of workloads, and then,
Okay. I generally see two approaches. You either have the person who needs to move a workload and not have a break in their workload and wants to transition that workload up to the cloud, or you see a person who's at a compelling event in their company. We're going to buy new hardware. We're going to switch to a new CRM. We're going to switch, the way we address our database, our tools, and this is a point to break where we can actually cleanly break from the older technology. I love the second type because, quite frankly, it's easier. We can build the entire environment. We can test the entire environment. They just keep running on their internal system until the new environment's ready, and then you choose the ever horrifying cut date where, okay, we're going to stop using System A. We're going to move to System B. The types where we have to transition workloads that are active, they can be challenging. And I almost used a much scarier word. And typically what we do there, I like to follow the same process. I like to build. I like to replicate the environment that we're going to move up to the cloud. And then I like to transition sections of it up to the cloud. Web hosting is typically easier to transition than, say, the back-end database work. But the scary part is when you have the second type where you have the old and the new and you're just cutting, you can always cut back. When you have the one that sort of has to flow like water up to the cloud, your cut dates become a lot more interesting.
Basically when it's integrated, if you will, right? Yeah. Versus standalone.
When it's integrated, especially if it's a full conversion off. Now, if we're talking about, maybe the third, which is we're going to hybridize our data center and our database, and maybe host our databases, or maybe host a section, web, data storage, data warehousing, sometimes those are easier than when we're trying to flow a whole application up, because we can flow that one piece up.
Yeah.
Test it, run it.
At the workload level, I think you hit on it. It's basically, it's basically standalone workloads versus workloads that are very, hybrid integrated.
That are very integrated.
And they're much more complicated, to do that.
And it's about the opportunity of is this, boy, it's great when you get that straight cut point where I'm working with a customer now who's been using a system to track documents internally for 20 years. And they're ready to move it all to the cloud, but they're perfectly happy to use their system until the cloud one's built, and we can test the cloud one, and we can see how many documents it can handle. And that's nirvana for a guy like me and for our teams, because we get to it's a very clean cut. The integrated workloads, all I can say is a lot of project management, a lot of knowing how your application works, what your workload calls to, the data, what I call the data paths. Some of the older applications, applications that have been running for years.
Got it.
You got to map all that out before you do it.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of get your perspective, because it's definitely, when you're down in the engineering side of it, I have a different kind of, the conversations I see and the challenges, another way to answer this question from a CIO sort of IT director level is, and I see this a lot, they're trying to figure out how do they better manage. As they're deploying and migrating workloads, they're looking ahead going, how am I going to manage this stuff? What's the best way for me to evolve my IT model, if you will, from sort of a traditional, I own all the infrastructure and I have to own everything, to, some of this I need to let my departments take more control over, or they're taking more control over. And how do I, as an IT director or CIO, how do I best manage that? And that's why you see a lot of strategies out there around orchestration and automation tools that, allow you to get in front of the public cloud and transact these workloads through tools to help better govern it. There are also other tools that just help you overall as a customer get visibility and management, of the usage that's happening in the cloud, right?
You're absolutely right, and I tend to focus on these conversations on the technical side, but the business practices, the business processes, that's all got to be considered when you're making these changes. Not only are you potentially messing with job descriptions and people's work, but you're really changing how you finance stuff, how it goes on your books. You're changing business processes. Just take it to a simple process on how email is handled. You're changing those processes about recovery and how do I get something back, or you're changing the processes of where I log in, and it really has to be an integrated change when you're flowing up to the cloud. And both sides, the back room geeks and the business guys really need to be involved to make sure it flows smoothly. Or, it's like moving into a building with no infrastructure. It could potentially be that.
And when you look at our, if you've been up on Avnet Cloud Ready, and you look at the offerings that we have prepackaged around Amazon, you'll see that they're kind of in categories: backup and DR, productivity and collaboration, test and dev, application hosting. I mean, clearly those are the, some of the areas where customers are looking at workloads and they're trying to figure out how to best leverage public cloud and AWS specifically to solve and integrate. Certainly test and dev is kind of one of those low-hanging fruit areas, but most customers are very aggressively going after large workloads like large web applications or production software applications that are impactful to their cost, and obviously take the most advantage of public cloud infrastructure from a sort of agility point of view as well as a cost perspective. Alpesh, when you get asked that question, what's your what's your answer, you know, in terms of common migration strategies?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with all the things that you said. And, you know, it's funny, what I've seen a lot of is very similar to what happened when virtualization first came on the scene. I think there's definitely a staged approach that needs to be taken. And because we've had some really cool tools now to help us kind of take what existing things are there on premise or you know, on single hardware and move it into the virtual space, I think that's what people are looking for. It's like, how can I just take what I'm running and just put it out on the cloud? And while there are some tools out there to do that, I'd say for the most part, it's just, you know, it's something that needs to be really thought through. And so what I've seen work really well is, you know, taking a look at what you want to first do, right? As you said, a good place to start is test dev, you know, because those workloads are very variable, and so you can, one, take a lot of advantages of some of the features of public cloud and what AWS has to offer, to really understand the system, and it really makes life easier to move those applications over and start working in it. And once you have a little bit more understanding of how it works, it's easier to move other workloads over, right? And what, you know, some of the ones that are easiest to start with are, you know, the backup or, you know, using AWS for a DR. So it helps kind of with that transition point to say, hey, you know, I've still got my production stuff running on site, but I'm backing up to AWS, and then from that backup methodology, you think, hey, maybe it's a great place to start using as my DR, you know, because if I try to plan out for how I'm going to do disaster recovery to like a colo or like a second data center, that's a lot of money, but I can do that with AWS a lot cheaper. So I think it's a staged approach that works really well for a lot of those customers, especially thinking about moving production workloads over. The other thing that I find works well is understanding that when they're, you know, starting up a new application or migrating from an old version to a new version, right? That helps with kind of that clean break that Eric mentioned. It allows you to not have to worry about, you know, I've got this system that's working and I'm going to move to this new thing that I don't know if it's going to work, and all that, you know, the uncertainty that goes with that. And, you know, it allows you to kind of build a new environment and build it right from the get-go, and then cut over just the users and point them to a different location. And I think that makes it a little bit easier.
You know, what amazes me, and just to contextualize this, from direct conversations that I've had with customers and partners, and to qualify this, I've talked to customers at the IT director and CIO level for small AWS customers, maybe running $15,000 a month, all the way up to customers running over $3 million a month in AWS. And one of the things I've learned consistently is they all continue to strive to adopt processes and tools to better manage not only, I think certainly the migrations for sure, but I'd say more holistically. You know, how am I going to better manage how am I going to better manage the cloud, both from a workload point of view and overall. And I see it consistently with all customer sizes. And I think that's a testament to also, clearly there's a lot of benefits. So it's not a debate about whether they should move to the cloud. It's not, that's usually not the question. It's how do I do it most effectively? What processes and governance make sense? How do I evolve my IT processes, because I know they're going to have to be different. And so it just amazes me at there's very similar challenges there, and that's the topics we're really talking about here, and what we're seeing. But you know, in terms of sort of adoption, customer adoption, I think another question, Justin asked the question, do you have any recommendations for cloud billing / accounting models and tools for resellers? And when we saw that question, I think to answer that, absolutely we have recommendations, you know, in that area, specifically for resellers, and obviously we have tools to help our resellers in that area. better manage their cloud billing, and we help them move into these new models of consolidated billing architectures that help give you visibility to your customers' spend and help your customers better manage their spend. And we'll certainly talk more about those. But I think from an Amazon point of view, you got to understand some basics around some of the billing models, and we thought we should maybe and I know we're moving through the hour really quickly here, so maybe Alpesh, give a quick kind of real simple overview on the billing models, if you will, that are inside of AWS, because it's going to drive some of the rest of this conversation. I thought we should ground everyone.
Sure, and I'll talk about it really from the level of the end user, right, and then we'll kind of back into how the resellers fit into it. But in general, when a user goes on and creates an AWS account, their billing, or what they're getting is basically our published list pricing rates, and they get that billing information through the billing portal basically within their AWS account, right? And AWS is very, technology-focused company, so everything really works or happens in that account window. And so what they're seeing is basically they're able to see their monthly usage as they go, right? At any point in the month, you can go into that billing portal and see what you've spent so far. There are ways that you can dig in and get a little bit more detailed reports. You can get a a PDF file that kind of gives you a high-level overview of what your compute, your storage, your data usage, on what all the usage and the spend or the money related to each of those were. And then you can go and dig in, and we've got some ways to get more detailed information, right? Because we had customers come in and say, hey, I need to get I know this high-level view is great, but I need to actually know exactly how much I use for each of my storage buckets, right? My S3 buckets, I want to dig down and see how much storage is in each of them. Maybe I have different departments that are using them, and I need to be able to bill back and those type of things. And over time, so we've come up with ways of a concept we call programmatic billing, which allows you to go in and get a CSV file, which has far more detailed information, and you can see, each server and exactly how long it ran. And then associated costs with that time that it was on, and all, and get very detailed information on that. So that was one way. And then the larger companies also kind of came back and said, well, I've got multiple accounts across the company, right? Different departments have gone on and created their own AWS accounts, and they're billing separately, and so we want to kind of consolidate that and bring it together under one umbrella. And when that request came in, we came up with this infrastructure, or this model of consolidated billing, as we call it, right? And it's really meant and was created for an end user, right? Think about a large company like Shell, right? And you can imagine that they've got multiple departments with lots of different entities or groups within them that use AWS and have their own AWS account. So we created this concept of consolidated billing, where you can have one kind of master paying account, and it's still a standard AWS account. You can go in there and spin up services just like you would any other account, but it's for the billing side of things. You basically give it master rights, and so once you make that master account, you can go in and link other AWS accounts to it. And what it's basically doing is saying that this master payer account is taking over the billing responsibilities for the accounts underneath it, and all of the usage for all of the accounts that are linked to that master payer account get aggregated, right? So when you look at the billing portal for that payer account, you'll be able to see the numbers that you see are basically an aggregate usage for all of the accounts underneath it, right? So, if all the 5 accounts like I have showing on my screen are using a terabyte of storage, the payer account will show that, 5 terabytes of storage. Now, there's some inherent benefits in that some of our services which have tiered pricing, meaning the more you use, the lower the price gets. You get the benefit of that, right? So, like, S3 storage is a really good example. There's a price that you pay for up to a terabyte of usage, and then from terabytes 2 through 50, there's a different price. It's a lower price. So if all of these 5 accounts are using a terabyte of storage, then they would be by themselves, let's say, being charged at the terabyte price, but then when you put that into the consolidated billing model, the paying account gets to the benefit of that 5 terabyte model, which is a lower rate. Now, what our resellers have done is started using this model as a way to manage all of their end customers. And so what they did was they created a master payer account for the reseller, and then all of the end customers that they had, they created as linked accounts underneath them. And that gave them a lot of those, those aggregated usage benefits, a single bill. It makes it easier to bill or get in for a single bill and then go down. The challenges with that came up are that you end up having to spend some operational time figuring out, well, what do I need to bill customer 1 or customer 2 or customer 3? So as I look at kind of the benefits of consolidated billing, we kind of went over that. One of the use cases for that comes out to be like if you have subsidiaries or multiple groups, you can do chargeback for them, and kind of resellers use that model to say, okay, I'll consider each of my end customers as a subsidiary or a group within me, and then but now I got to go figure out what my charging is. So there's a little bit of challenge around that, but it allows them an easier way to manage all of their accounts under one umbrella.
Awesome. And what we see with, just to kind of highlight a couple of things that you said, Alpesh, from an end customer point of view, a lot of times we see because of the ease of obviously working with and leveraging AWS and how fast you can go from obviously concept to execution and do it on a credit card even. We see a lot of end customers who have departments who've actually gone out and actually started leveraging AWS, and half the time that's the way it starts, and that can actually grow quite a bit. I've seen many examples of customers who are running multiple accounts via credit card at the department level to address needs. And so the consolidated billing architecture that Alpesh is talking about, that's a great way for the customers to, the IT, more the IT organization to start to bring together those accounts, and you can do that pretty easily in terms of the process to link those accounts together. And obviously a lot of benefits around visibility to spend and ability to roll up all of that usage into a consolidated bill model. There are some challenges around the complexity of translating those charges and reassigning them, and that's one of the things that we're trying to address with some of the tools that we provide. So not only from a reseller point of view, helping you bring your customer usage together, but also at the end customer, a lot of times they could really benefit from being consolidated, but they just don't have the processes and tools, and in some cases the knowledge to actually bring that together. And that's one of the things that we really focus on in what we call ACT, which is Avnet Cloud Toolset. So very feature-rich and very deep in functionality to help a partner robustly manage their overall consolidated spend and usage, as well as extend that functionality down, to the customers. So when we look at some of the other, I guess, challenges in visibility and management and optimization, and this is where it starts to get, we're getting out of the 101 a little bit. And I think, Alpesh, you mentioned a simpler example of S3 kind of being one area where you can aggregate, your usage and obviously get to some sort of volume discounting. And that's a great example. EC2 on the compute side is a pretty big area, and I think generally speaking from what we see, compute charges represent probably 70% of a customer's spend. That's where a good chunk of the spend is. And there's a concept of reserved instances inside of AWS, and a reserved instance is really, think of it as a financial vehicle. Basically, if I pay a certain amount up front for compute resources, I'm buying down my hourly cost. So I'm going to spend $500 up front for an EC2 instance type, and then that's going to mean every time I use that instance type, I'm basically going to be charged at a lower hourly rate. And so if you're using these instances full time, obviously as a customer, and subsequently that you could think about this as a reseller as well, it might make sense for you to make reserved instance purchases to buy down your overall cost. And that's something that a lot of customers do. And quite frankly, one of the reasons why they move to a consolidated billing model is to allow them to do that, consolidate their demand usage across all of their department accounts, roll that up, and then leverage reserved instances to optimize their cost by buying down their hourly spend. So if that sounds complicated, it is. And honestly, we strive hard in this area to help customers and partners understand how to, and there's a lot of great tools inside of AWS to help really simplify that, as well as some of the things that we're doing.
I don't know if they so much as simplify as make it possible to boy, exploit's another bad word that I use a lot, but to exploit or to take advantage of the pricing breaks you get both by tiering and by buying reserved instances. I always compare it to a futures game. It's very much a futures game, and anybody who's dealt with stockbrokers or people who play the futures market know they hire rocket scientists to do that kind of math. You do some of that in AWS. You have to be very aware of what your inventories are. You have to be very aware of what the breakpoints are. You have to be very aware of where you're best and what your best instance type and what your best usage type around an instance to get you the best cut, basically. And they absolutely provide great tools for that. But it's.
So I think the picture we're trying to paint here is there's definitely, when we start talking about billing models and the questions that many of you ask, recommendations for cloud billing and accounting models and tools, you start to understand, hopefully from this conversation, what great flexibility and options exist in AWS, first of all, to help customers, but also recognize that there are some tools to simplify that. And so that kind of leads into some of the, and I notice we have about 10 minutes left here. So I want to shift gears to go a little deeper into some of these tools and just talk about them. In terms of core AWS tools, Alpesh, maybe touch on some of the tools that exist to help customers, manage these consolidated billing models and just in general manage the services that are being deployed. And by the way, before you do that, I would say, I kind of bucketize these tools. There's a lot of tools out there, and I get partners and customers asking us every day what tools are good, and I think part of the time it's understanding what these tools do and what they're focused on. There's what I would say a group of tools focused on systems management. And that's, visibility to what's really going on in my resources, and it's down to the server level, and it's even down to the application level, and it's about availability of those services.
Amazon has tools that'll get you to the CPU and memory level that a customer's used to seeing from any console or any tool they use to manage a PC or a server.
Sure, yeah.
So the technical tool set that you're talking about, is not only very wide in that there are a lot of good providers doing it, doing everything from automate automating, he didn't even get it well there, automating your backup of your AWS environment and of your databases and the snapshots that you've been able to automate to data center-based drives. There are tools, everything to do that, to the tools that will tell you what the CPU utilization on your instance has been over the last 30 days, so you can make a decision, do I need a bigger one, do I need a smaller one?
Yeah, so kind of system management for visibility and deep, deep reporting. There's orchestration and automation tools to help you provision, these environments and somewhat track them as well. And then there's usage and billing tools to help you get visibility to what these resources are costing you.
And the amazing thing in my mind, coming from a tech background with a little business, is that the billing tools are as complicated and as deep as the technical tools at the moment.
Yeah.
Because they were designed by the technical people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's true. And I do see a meshing of some of these together, and I think sometimes it's a good meshing, and other times it confuses people because you have a tool set that does a really good job in systems management, but it's being leveraged to track usage and billing. And there's all kinds of issues we see with that when you start really meshing these together. We could talk all day on that, but maybe Alpesh, from a core AWS tools, in those buckets, sort of systems management, orchestration, automation, and usage and billing, really, quick. And I know we're gonna run out of time here. Just touch on high level each of those bucket categories and some of the tools that are available in each of those.
Sure. So at the systems management level, we have something called CloudWatch, which basically allows you to get a very deep view of your infrastructure, right? So as Eric mentioned, you can go down to the CPU level again. That's the tool that you're going to use to manage all the technical stuff, right? Look at your usages of your data coming back and forth and that. And you can be as high as you want. You can get nice, pretty charts and graphs, or you can go down to the very deep technical level. So that's CloudWatch. That's the management tier. CloudFormation is our automation or orchestration tool. And both of these tools are kind of by themselves are free, right? And we don't charge necessarily for this tool. It's a capability that allows you to just manage your environment, right? So there's no additional charge for that. And CloudFormation basically allows you to create scripts to go deploy things, right? So if you want to, if you have kind of let's say that you design an infrastructure that you're going to utilize often, right? It's a networking arrangement with 2 servers and and storage are assigned to it, right? So you're going to deploy that multiple times. You can go into CloudFormation and build that in, and then with a click of a button, have it deploy that. So CloudFormation is the methodology for automating and orchestrating things, and it's really deep. It provides a lot of depth because it can basically do anything that you can do with AWS, and even some things that you can't just do through the GUI console or GUI management. You have to be on command line. You can do those actions through CloudFormation. So that's a good thing to know. On the other side, actually, so you'd also mentioned being able to optimize your environment, right? So as part of actually our support side, we have a tool called Trusted Advisor that's available. And Trusted Advisor basically allows you to go in and get basically best practices advice from AWS, right? And so Trusted Advisor will give you advice on looking at your security configurations to see, are you meeting the standard security best practices, looking at, and optimizing kind of the billing side, right? So if you're using certain types of instances and maybe you can get some of those benefits out of a reserved instance, it'll tell you that, right? So, hey, you've got 10 of these types of instances. They stay on for about this much time. Maybe you can buy 3 reserved instances, and that'll help you lower your overall bill. So Trusted Advisor, and again, it's built in through the support side portal, is the portal it's a tool that it really does a good job of giving you some really good information about how to use best practices in your environments. And I put up a really quick slide. So as we're talking, you can take a look at kind of the 4 categories that Trusted Advisor goes into. But it's a great tool, and it is available if you have like business level support or higher, and then you can just go into the support center and get that information. So I'll give that back to you, Dan. Maybe you can run through the Avnet tool really quickly also and talk about where that will help.
Yeah, thanks, Alpesh. So, we're going to, first of all, we could spend hours on this topic, honestly. There's so many great tools and ways to use them that we've seen and leveraged. We have created something called Avnet Cloud Toolset, and it is designed specifically for both resellers and for their customers to take a lot of the complexity out of overall visibility, billing and chargeback functionality, and provisioning and management of AWS to help you as a partner, obviously manage your customers, but also help your customers. So it's got value to both you, and you can extend that down to your customers. We could spend an hour just talking about the functionality, but when I say manage, I don't mean manage down at the sort of service level. There's great tools that do that, like CloudFormation that does orchestration, and CloudWatch that gives you visibility to what your resources are doing. But companies are trying to change their IT processes, and they're trying to figure out how to better allow their departments to consume resources, but have some controls in place, and that's what we try and do with the tool set. It's more at the overall holistic level. When I say provisioning, we help you with your customers provision new accounts. Obviously, once they get their accounts provisioned, provisioning services inside those accounts and visibility to utilization and those sorts of things come from some of the core tools that you can leverage for free from AWS. But if you want to know overall, at any point in the month, what department was using what accounts and how much spend was happening and where that spend was happening, and how do I best optimize that spend aggregately overall, that's really where we come in with the cloud tool set. So I know we're basically out of time, and there was some other questions that we did not get a chance to get to, so we will definitely circle around and make sure we respond to the remainder of the questions that came in. But to everyone that joined, I hope you got some great information, and really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and look forward to the next session. We will have these monthly. We've had the monthly, even though we had taken a bit of a break. So stay tuned on Avnet Cloud Ready. Also stay tuned for the recording of this as well, because it will be up on iTunes, YouTube, and Avnet Cloud Ready as well. And again, really appreciate everyone joining. Feel free to reach out to us. If there are any other questions that you come up with, my Twitter handle's there, and my LinkedIn account information is available as well. So, or my direct email at Avnet. And Alpesh, thanks very much. Really appreciate you joining us today and giving your insights and experience around AWS as well.
Thank you for inviting me. Hope to speak with the partners soon.
Awesome. So with that, everyone, we'll sign off and enjoy the rest of your weekend, I should say. Thanks.